So I'm really excited to share our next speaker with you. Tracy Brower is a friend of mine, and I've seen her speak. Thankfully, I've been able to speak with her one-on-one about life and about things, but I think this will be my fourth time seeing her speak, and every time I pick up something new from her. Tracy is a PhD sociologist studying work-life fulfillment and happiness. She's the author of The Secrets to Happiness at Work, a great little book. I highly recommend it. And Bring Work to Life. She's the Vice President of Workplace Insights for Steelcase and a contributor to Forbes.com and Fast Company. Tracy's an award-winning speaker and has over 25 years of experience working with global clients to achieve business results. Her work has been translated into 17 languages. Tracy holds a PhD in sociology, a Master of Management and Organizational Culture, and a Master of Corporate Real Estate in the workplace with a workplace specialization. I'm guessing she kind of likes learning. You can find her at tracybrower.com and on LinkedIn and other places as well. So I'm just really excited to be able to introduce to you someone who I know pretty well, Tracy Brower, Dr. Tracy Brower.
Thanks you all for having me. I really, really appreciate it. They say whatever you choose to study in school, make sure you like it because you will be talking a lot about it. And that's definitely the case for me. I drew the long straw when I looked at studying happiness and joy and the work experience. And so thank you for having me. Thanks Teresa, thanks Jeffrey, thanks Roger for helping to make these connections. So work is such an important moment right now, and I like to say that this will be the most significant reinvention of work in our experience. It may vary a bit by region or by industry, it may vary a bit depending on role, but overall, we are thinking as a society so consciously about what we do, why we do it, with whom, for whom, when, where, and how, that we have this amazing opportunity to create great work experiences and for us to feel fulfilled in that process. And we will talk a little bit more about that. We are in the midst of a talent revolution. I love David's content. I was taking copious notes and I'm so following this. But I like to say that the biggest evidence that what we were doing previously wasn't working perfectly is the fact that we were in the middle of this talent revolution. There is this grass is greener dynamic that has been occurring where people go, I'm not sure this feels quite right where I am, and I want to do something else. And that level of low or high dissatisfaction has been a driver of a lot of this talent revolution that we're in the middle of, great resignation, etc. And we know that this isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and what an opportunity and an impetus we have as leaders. I just published an article not too long ago about the effect that managers have on mental health. 70% of people say that their manager has a greater impact on their mental health than their doctor or their therapist, on par with the effect that their spouse or partner has on their mental health. Isn't that incredible? And so the average leader goes, oh my gosh, as if I didn't have enough pressure already, let me take this on as well. But that is an amazing opportunity for us. And the exciting thing is that there's lots and lots of people having this conversation right now, and so we can create the conditions for great experiences. The other thing that I think is interesting to start with is a little bit of a hybrid paradox in terms of how work is changing. So one of the things that we're paying attention to is a lot of the research on people's life experience. People are reporting that they're sleeping more, they're exercising more, they're eating more healthfully. And their life at work, in many cases, people are reporting has declined. They don't feel like they have clear expectations. They don't necessarily feel like their voices are heard. They may not feel connected with a mission or a purpose of the organization. So while parts of life have gotten better, parts of life at work have not. And that is an opportunity for all of us to really think about in terms of how we model the way and how we can influence so many lives in so many ways. I think it's also really fascinating to think about the expanding role of work. We are facing this narrative in the popular press about quiet quitting, about do as little as you can, about the ideal is to spend as much time on the couch as you can and hold back from work. And that, frankly, is just heartbreaking to me, because work is a really important part of life. A great life includes work. There's a beautiful book called Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. And it talks about how one of the worst things we can say to somebody is, we're good. We don't need your help. We're good. We're good over here. Because we want to be part of a community. We want to feel obligations to each other. We want to feel like we are making a contribution and expressing our talents. And work is a fundamental way that we are able to do that. The other thing that has happened in life is that we have reduced friction brilliantly. We have elevated convenience over collaboration and connection. We don't talk to the barista anymore. We order our coffee on the app. We don't talk to the person at Target anymore or at the dry clean anymore. We get a delivery on our front doorstep. And there is wonderful evidence that superficial connections are very correlated with happiness. So chatting with somebody at the dry cleaner is kind of a big deal. We want to be a society where we talk to each other and interact with each other. And as those superficial connections decline, the role of work is elevated, because that is a really important place that we feel connected to our community. And so the work and the workplace have an expanded role. And we've been talking so much this morning about the extent to which well-being has been suffering. The loneliness epidemic is real. The mental health challenges that people are facing are real. And the really important part of that is that as well-being problems escalate, it is absolutely correlated with our distance from each other, with our feelings of disconnection with each other. And so work has an important role to play in us feeling like, I got something that's due to somebody else. I have somebody who's counting on me. I have something to teach to others. And so the workplace, to Andrew's points just now, really is a wonderful frontier for us to have amazing levels of influence. So here's a question for you. We're gonna do this the old-fashioned way. Do you remember when you used to raise your hand in class? It was really exciting stuff, right? All right, so here's the question. I'm gonna read you the question, I'm gonna read you all the options, and then I'm gonna come back and ask you. To what extent are you optimistic about the future of work? A, greatly, bring it on, the best is yet to come. B, it's mixed for me, I can see pros and cons. C, I don't want to be a pessimist, but I'm not really sure it will be ideal. Or D, I need another cup of coffee for this one. All right, how many for A? You are greatly, bring it on, optimistic about the future. Oh, wow. Okay, good. So I'd say that's maybe 15-ish%. How about B? It's mixed. I can see pros and cons. We got our majority there. So maybe 80-ish%. Anybody pessimistic about the future? Wow, lovely. How am I not surprised about that in this group? Anybody just need another cup of coffee? All right, you all. I think it's so helpful to think about our optimism and think about our worldview. Sociologically speaking, the number one way that we learn is by watching other people, listening to other people, experiencing other people. So as leaders, we have a profound impact. And as individuals, we have a profound impact because human beings learn through modeling. So I think we can bring that optimism or that partial optimism forward in lots of ways. This is about the moment where good, hard-hitting business leaders say, yeah, but Tracy, really, this is kind of a fluffy concept, and maybe we could get on to the really important things. The topic of happiness and joy has been profoundly studied, researched, and there is so much evidence for really great work experiences to have a very powerful impact on business. When people are happier, they set bigger goals, they're more likely to reach them. They are more likely to be retained in your organization. They are more likely to have a positive spillover effect with others. They are more likely to perform at higher levels. And so there are really good reasons at personal levels for us to really think about happiness and think about how we're engaging people, but also from a business standpoint, the evidence is absolutely there. I wrote an article in September of 2021 on empathy, and now empathy is the number one leadership skill, the most important leadership skill right now. And that article has gotten 3 million views. It is so exciting to me. And part of what the article did is it made a business case for empathy. It made a business case for kindness, for compassion. It made a business case for us interacting with people the way that we know is best. And that has garnered so much attention, and that gives me hope for where we're going in the future. The reason that's important to us is that I think when we are optimistic and when we bring that positive worldview, that joyful worldview, that has some really important underpinnings and important impacts. All right, let's talk about work life. How many times have we heard the language of work-life balance, right? It's so not about balance. I was living the dream. I had a couple of little kids who are very old now. And not so old, but wonderfully old. Reed, we miss them. Our daughter is 25 and our son is 21. And they say, you know, really, really appreciate the small things in life because someday you'll realize they were the big things, right? So I was living the dream. I had 2 little kids, and I was going to go back to school, and I was a working mom and a wife and all of those things. And actually, I was going back for some more learning, to your point, Roger. And our son said to his kindergarten class, "Yeah, my mom's going back to school again because she didn't get it right the first time." So that was quite lovely, and I'm sure he was right. I'm sure he still is right. But it's not about balance. And so I looked around and said, you know, we talk about this work-life balance thing as if it's precarious, as if we can't have it all, as if we have to choose between work and the rest of our lives, when really, if we can integrate, if we can navigate, we can have it all. We may not be able to have it all at once, but we can have it all, and we can make some really, really informed choices about how to do that. So I like to say it's absolutely not about balance. We can pick lots of other words like harmony or navigation or integration. So here is some thinking about that work-life conversation, which I think is really helpful. There's a brilliant sociologist, her name is Patricia Voidanoff, and she talks about the idea of demand and capacity, that our feelings about work and life are always based on this dynamic balance, this dynamic tension, actually, between demand and capacity. Demand is about, oh my gosh, how much is coming at me? How much do I feel like I have to fulfill? And capacity is about, how capable do I feel of dealing with that? And we can affect both sides of that balance. We can affect both sides of that dynamic tension in the workplace. When we give people clear expectations, we work on the demand side. When we give people development opportunities, we work on the demand side. When we provide leadership that is supportive and feels reasonable versus craziness, that works on the demand side. And on the supply or capacity side, we give people support, we give them mentorship, we do things like childcare. You were talking about, David, right? So many organizations are providing more of those kinds of support. But the biggest support, in my view, is the culture that we create. When we have cultures where people feel respected, where they can bring their whole self, where they can feel like even their flaws are embraced, those are a very big deal. So I like this idea of work life and demand and capacity, and the idea that work can not just be a neutral, like, oh, I made it through the day, thank goodness. Work can be a source of joy. We can come home at the end of the day and go, you know, good work. It may not be perfect, and there will be ebbs and flows, and we will have days that are gut punches. But all of that is part of an overall sense that we can make work a really viable and important source of happiness for people. All right. So we've talked a little bit about where we are contextually. We've talked a little bit about work life and alternatives to that idea of balance. What about leadership? I love this topic. I like to think about this leadership challenge that we're in the midst of as the great sift. We have seen so many leaders who have struggled mightily, and we've seen leaders who have absolutely come to the fore. The leaders who were so good to begin with at engaging people, at motivating them, at validating them, at managing to objectives and outcomes. Those are the leaders who are doing so well today. And there is incredible pressure on leadership right now. I wrote an article not too long ago about the emotional labor of leaders, right? We got to worry about so many more things than we ever had to worry about in terms of not just creating great results, but enabling great performance and working through well-being issues and asking people the right questions without asking them the wrong questions. Having a clear opinion that is meaningful enough that it is a clear point of view without alienating people. Those are really hard things that leaders are facing today. And the other thing that is so relevant is this idea of opportunity and the extent to which when we lead well, people report greater well-being. They report greater likelihood to stay. They can be more innovative, right? Because we can take a risk when we feel like we're supported. And so leaders have so much to face right now. The other thing that I love to consider is the leadership laser. So did anybody see, this is a crowd that actually might be able to answer this question. I find myself, as I get older, I find myself giving examples and going, oh shoot, there's nobody in the group who understands this example. Like Mary Poppins. Does anybody remember Mary Poppins? Okay, good, some of you do. Anybody remember pagers? Do you remember pagers? Oh, I'm so glad, we're among friends. For those of you who have never heard of a pager, it was this little device you wore that would like beep you if you were needed. All right, so does anybody remember the movie called The Accidental Tourist? Okay, oh good, we have a couple. So I don't know if it was the best movie in the world, but I love the title and the concept. It was the accidental tourist. I think a lot of times leadership is like that. Like we are absolutely models for behavior. We are models for value. We are models for what goes around here. We are models for the culture, whether we mean to be or not. We don't have to think, oh, I'm all that. And we are absolutely sort of accidental in modeling because people put an outsized laser on leaders. People put an outsized amount of attention on leaders. So maybe you're walking in the parking lot in the morning and you've got a scowl and people go, oh no, what's going on with the business? Or what's going on with me? Or what's happening? When really, like, I don't know, maybe your dog was slow that morning or you just are having trouble waking up. Leaders have such an impact. And the other thing that has happened, which is so relevant to our current context, is that we have so much information coming at us all the time. We're deluged by information from so many sources that people are increasingly looking to leaders as the single source of truth. Like, who do I trust? How do I make sense of this? I just heard this new thing about ChatGPT. I just heard this new thing about the economy. I just heard this new thing about global unrest. What does that mean to our business? What does that mean to our future as a business? What does that mean to me as an employee? What does that mean to me as an individual? And leaders are so often in a role of helping to interpret that. And I think that is no small thing. And we can bring such a powerful worldview to the way that we interpret and provide information. And I like to say that this is about people prefer certainty. If we look neurologically, we tend to shy away from ambiguity. We prefer certainty. We prefer to know what's coming. And leaders very often cannot possibly provide certainty, but we can provide clarity. Here's what we know. Here's what we're wondering. Here's where we're going in terms of our direction. Here's what we don't know for sure. I think that clarity over certainty can be very important in the way that we interact. So leadership, it's a moment for leaders, right? Here's a question for you. To what extent has your leadership shifted or evolved in the last couple of years? A, totally, this has totally changed me in the way I lead. B, to some extent, some of my approaches are the same, others have evolved. C, minimally, I'm the same leader I always was. Or D, wow, I've never considered this. How about A, anybody changed you very, very significantly? A few, all right, that might be like a little 5% or so. Anybody B, some extent? Big majority, that has to be a 90-ish majority. Anybody minimally, I'm the same leader I was before? A couple of you, yeah. And I think some people are voting twice. Is that true? Did you vote twice? Oh, because I was going to say that was a really brilliant idea. Anybody D never considered this before? I think this is you could have a vote twice kind of situation here, right? Because we might say, I am the same to my core. I have absolute values that have not shifted because I am deeply committed to those values. And, oh my gosh, the way that I interact has shifted significantly. So I think this is partly about our impact on people. Our intent and our impact are so driven by how we're evolving. I love the leadership model, which is situational leadership, right? Like, we know there are some things that are core to great leadership, but a really important part of great leadership is also meeting people where they are, evolving with context, evolving ourselves and our learning. The future is something we enter, is not something we enter, it's something we create. So I love the idea of empowerment. Here is how we create great experiences for people. And there are lots more things than this, but these are the things that rise to the surface. One is meaning. We all have an instinct to matter. So how can we give people that line of sight from what I do to what you do and he does and she does and finally our customer? And how does that really, really matter for this individual and their unique contribution? Meaning is such a big deal. And I love to consider the topic of identity. We tend to feel a great level of identity with our work in a really good way, right? Like, I'm a designer, or I'm a researcher, or I'm a owner of a company, or you fill in the blank. This actually started during the Industrial Revolution. We used to be agrarian, and so we would be plowing fields, and we would be harvesting crops with our neighbors. We would be churning butter with our families in our kitchens. And then we moved to cities, and increasingly our identity was shaped by the work that we were doing. I was a baker among bakers. I was putting horseshoes on horses among farriers. And so work as a point of identity can actually be an extraordinarily positive thing. And there's also the concept of dimensionality. Like, we need lots of layers of meaning and lots of sources of meaning. Work is one of those, but we also have other sources of meaning. And happiness is significantly correlated with more dimensionality. We feel like we have identity with something we care about, and we feel like we've got other kinds of things that we care about and are investing in. So meaning is a great way for us to influence people's experience, how they matter, how they uniquely matter, how they are contributing to their purpose and the purpose of our organizations. Connections. Oh my gosh. If there's anything that keeps me awake at night, it is a fear about the degradation of community and connections in our society. We do not feel connected with people anymore, statistically speaking, generally speaking, globally speaking. And this is utterly related to all kinds of health, physical health, cognitive health, emotional health. There is brand new research that having one or two close friends is more important to your health outcomes, cancer, heart disease, depression, anxiety, you name it, dementia. Having one or two close friends is more important to your health outcomes than your habits around diet or exercise. And they are on par with smoking. That's a big deal, because if we have societies where people feel a level of social disconnection, we will suffer for that. And so one of the ways that I think we can be in the world is to really, really attend to others, to really connect, to really listen, to put those devices aside. And organizations have a critical role to play here. 75% of people say they make their friends at work, and work is context for so many connections. I did another article, and it was all about why it's great to have friends at work and why work is a good context for friendship. And there was this really, really big debate that ensued on LinkedIn. And some people said, yes, best friends at work, that's the lifeblood of social capital and effectiveness and mental health. And other people said, no, not so fast. I need some really good boundaries, and I don't want too close of friends at work. And so somebody finally in the LinkedIn debate stepped in and said, maybe it's about friendly. Like, we don't have to have best friends at work if we don't want to, but we definitely want friendly experiences. Connections, connections, connections are a really important way that we can pave the way for people to have great experiences, to retain talent, to engage talent, to motivate talent. And it's a misnomer that we bond best through social activities. It is good to bond through social activities. So if you're going to your, cooking class as a team, or you're doing your axe throwing or whatever you like to do, you keep doing that, go with your bad self. However, a more powerful place to help people bond is through sharing of tasks. When we're rolling up sleeves together, when we're solving problems together, when we're working across departments, when we're giving people the opportunity to grow in new lanes, that is a very big deal in terms of how we can lead for retention, for engagement, for motivation, and for great experiences. I'm going to skip that and keep us moving. The other thing that is a very big deal is stretch and challenge. So we are absolutely motivated by things that we don't already know how to do. Of course, we need the things in our lives that are easy and we can kind of do without thinking quite so hard about it. But thriving is always about not just current performance, but also the idea that you want your next personal best. The thriving literature comes out of elite athletes and child development. And so when we are thriving, we're performing well. We have a nice overlap between what we love to do and what we have to do, but we are also pushing for the next thing. We are stretching, we are challenging our staff, we are challenging our organization. We're giving people new opportunities to figure out their own best capability. There is, the concept of PTSD and post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a very big deal. There is also post-traumatic growth, which is a thing. When we go through really hard times, we learn about our capabilities. We are reminded of who we can really count on. And we're very newly clear about our key priorities. And so when we give people stretch opportunities, when we ask them for their input on something that they may not be 100% ready for, but they're 70% ready for, that is extraordinarily motivating and extraordinarily correlated with happiness. And there's an idea about eustress here too. This is the parabola curve that looks like a lowercase n. If you don't have enough stress, you will be absolutely down in the dumps, you will be demotivated. If you have too much stress on the other side of that parabola curve, you'll be down in the dumps, depressed, demotivated, burned out. But if we have just enough stress, if we have just enough challenge, that is the thing that will keep us coming back. And then the other thing is valuing and autonomy. How do we value people? And David, I love you talked about flexibility. The more we can give people flexibility, and it may not be possible in every job, in every period of time. There may be creative ways we need to do that. But the more that we demonstrate for people that we're treating them like grown-ups, what a great idea, right? The more that we give them flexibility, that we support all of the things that they're facing in their life, it's a really, really good idea in terms of retention. And that is good for labor market, that is good for us getting the results that we need because we have the staff that we need, but even more importantly, it is all about how we create great experiences for other human beings that we are going through life together with. So let me just share a little bit about my perspectives. I think that leadership is fundamentally hopeful. Like, what are leaders doing? Leaders are setting expectations with employees about where they're going to go. Leaders are setting goals for their organizations about where they're going to go. Leaders are setting a vision for how it can be. Leaders are setting a vision and a mission for how we will affect our customers and our clients. And so for me, that is fundamentally hopeful. And I like to think about the journey that I've had, which I will share, through 3 lenses, and those are hope and faith and love. For me, hope has always been about that next thing and that idea that we are so empowered. Like, we want to reach out, we want to reach forward, we want to do the thing that feels like a risk, and we want to be supported in doing that. And so for me, that idea of hope has been formative in terms of an overall level of optimism and an overall level of empowerment. And that is a really big part of what I like to talk about and what I like to write about. Like, I think that we absolutely need to feel empowered toward what we can accomplish and the extent to which we absolutely have an influence. So for me, hope has been a fundamental worldview. Another one for me has been faith. And we've all had ups and downs in our careers, right? Anybody who hasn't had a down in their career is either deluding themselves or not telling the truth, right? And there have been some great times in my career, but there have been a couple of times in particular that have been really, really hard. And after that, they were hard, and they were hard. They were really hard. And so faith was a really important part of that. The faith that I would get through it, the faith that I could draw lessons from that, the faith that I would be able to move forward, and not just faith in myself, but faith in the system and faith in God for how I would be able to get through it and how people who cared about me would also be able to get through it. So faith has been a really important lens for me. And the other lens for me has been love. Like, we all work with people who are absolutely a match, right? You feel that chemistry with somebody. You could talk to them forever. You just really feel like you're clicking together. And then others who might feel a little bit difficult now and then, if we're honest. And I feel like how we express love for each other in the work environment, in our personal environments, in our faith journeys, is an important worldview for me as well. I remember there was one point in my career where I was working with this really tough guy. His name was Nigel, and he was really tough, and everybody agreed he was tough. But by goodness, I decided I was really gonna like Nigel. I just decided I was not gonna let Nigel get under my skin. And Nigel has become an analogy for me for so many things. And so this idea of love, this idea of what we bring to others and how we express love, but also manifest love in the way that we live our lives. And honestly, I feel like I feel so much gratitude for the platform that I have with my writing, because I get to, on a weekly basis, about 12 times a month, I get to weave in a little bit of these kinds of messages, right? Subtly, so that people can hear them. Subtly, so that we're not feeling like we're, pounded by empowerment and, create your own destiny. But very much, I think, in the platform I've had, I've appreciated the way that we can express love and the way that we can expect of ourselves that we are loving with others and empathetic and caring toward others and compassionate. So for me, this idea of hope and faith and love have been an important part of my career journey and my faith journey as well. And I believe that all work has dignity. Martin Luther King Jr. said this originally. There was a giant strike by waste management workers. And he talked about how, we value, appreciate, and respect healthcare providers in our society because they reduce the incidence of disease and they increase the likelihood of health and well-being. And he said, we should also value garbage collectors and trash management because we reduce the incidence of disease, we increase health, and we increase well-being in society. And so I absolutely believe that all work has dignity, and how we express ourselves and how we express all the best in ourselves based on our Creator is a wonderful place to do it at work. So that's my story. All right, you all. This is one of the most significant contributors to bonding is surviving hard times together. So when we go through tough times, it's amazing how a little tomorrow can make up for a lot of yesterday. These are your takeaways. Model the way, attend to others, and be intentional and validating toward others. If we emphasize community and connection and give people stretch opportunities, all of those things will matter significantly. So this is our moment for a bright future. We absolutely can create the conditions for retention, for thriving, for engagement, and we can move to some really new places, or we can continue to be in the great places that we are and help to create those conditions for others. So thank you, I appreciate it.
So we have time for a few questions, and I'd love to hear what's on your mind.
What is the best fulfilling thing about the work that you do? What gets you up every day to say, I love this, this is why I do this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What gets me up every day, and what do I think is most fulfilling about my work? There are so many things. I think I get to learn so many new things every day. I get to kind of do a lot of my own thing. Like I have a ton of autonomy and I get to invent what I'm doing to a great extent. But I really love the people that I work with. I know that sounds so cliche, but oh my gosh, I drive an hour every day back and forth, most every day. I work hybrid like many of us do. But it's the people around me that earn the commute, really. Like I go into work and I'm like, I like these people. These are good people. I'll never forget when I was interviewing for this particular role I'm in now, one of the senior leaders said, yeah, we don't have politics in this organization. And I thought, yeah, right. I don't believe you for a second. But it really is true. There's so much level of respect. And that, I think, is so important for all of us, right? Like, what is the thing that will fulfill us most? And how do we make sure that we're creating that for the others around us as well? It's a great question. Thank you. Go ahead.
You mentioned at the beginning that leaders have a lot on their plate, and now there's more. Make everyone feel wonderful, accepted, included, engaged. How do you inspire or recommend that we be more intentional?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think intentionality has to do with both a task and a relationship component. And I think we've talked a lot about the relationship component of intentionality. Like, how do we really tune into people and see when they may not be on top of the world that day? How do we ask questions, the right amount of questions, Goldilocks questions, to seek people out? How do we support them by providing resources? We don't have to each be a social worker, but how do we support them by providing resources? How do we demonstrate empathy? How are we intentional about taking the time and attention, giving people attention? I think that's a really big part of it. And I think there's also an intentionality about task. Like, I think sometimes we think that a really empowering, nurturing work environment is one where it's just really nice and sweet. And I think there's a big part of accountability that goes with that too. We want to be held accountable. I want to know that my work matters enough that you're going to hold me accountable. So when we really give people feedback, when we really try to match as much as possible what they do really well with what we need them to do in the organization, and push them to try new things, when we demonstrate our caring by saying, I noticed this and such, and maybe here's another alternative to the way that you can do it. I think there's an intentionality on both the relationship side and the task side, and I think that's a big part of how we create those best conditions through leadership. It's a great question. It's a really great question. I think through writing, so I'm like, I gotta write an article about that one. I gotta think about that one through the written word. Any other questions? Go ahead.
With all the uncertainty going on, and you mentioned certainty as a topic, is there any way leaders could sharpen their skills at leading in or through uncertainty?
Oh my gosh, that's the question of the hour, isn't it? I wrote an article not too long ago about the new skills of leadership. And I think that we absolutely need to find a way not just to tolerate ambiguity, but to embrace ambiguity. This is a little driving tip for you for the day. The number one thing that dictates your speed is not road conditions. It is not ice or snow, regardless of how well we know that in Michigan. It is your sight line. If you can't see very well in front of you, that is the thing that will slow you down, even though the other things maybe should slow us down a little more. So I think we're in this moment where we need to figure out how to keep the foot on the gas and keep moving forward. At the same time, we just can't see as much. And so I think leaders can absolutely read widely, and we know algorithms work way too well, and we are in echo chambers. So I think we need to read widely, but also seek out and do pull reading and pull research. We got a lot of push coming at us, but I think we need to read as much as we can about things that might be different so that we are aware of them, so that we can be as impactful as possible. So staying really, really contextually aware, I think, is really helpful. And I think another thing from the standpoint of dealing with ambiguity is to ask really good questions and to be explicit about the questions that we're asking. Like, the most important thing isn't having the right answers. The most important thing is asking really good questions. And I think we can engage people in that process as well. How are we inspiring others to ask questions. And then I think too, like we all know more through the network. We all know more through each other and through our connections. And so to the extent that we can also help others to be curious and help others to ask questions, and for us to create environments where we can bring up the crazy idea or share the thing that seems a little off kilter but might be relevant, I think that is also really helpful in dealing with ambiguity, engaging more people in that contextual awareness. So it's a great question. And I think the last thing that's worth saying is being able to make decisions, right? Like sometimes when we're in the midst of so much ambiguity, it's like, oh my gosh, where do I go? But not to decide is always to decide. So the more we can just still find a way to make a decision and then be able to revisit that when that's the right thing. So it's great. All right, thanks you all. Super appreciate it.